Happy Friday the 13th! 2 days ago. But still, we hope you guys enjoyed our look at the most new metal horror movie of all time as we broke down Freddy vs. Jason. Now it's time to take a look at some others in the Friday the 13th franchise, because it's one of our favorites here at JoBlo, and we want to highlight some of our favorite entries. I'm Tyler Nichols with JoBlo, and thank you so much for joining me for this celebration of everyone's favorite mama's boy. First up, we've got Lance Velchek waxing poetic about Terry Kaiser and the insanity of Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. One of the greatest tragedies in horror is that we don't have HD versions of these cut deaths. Next, Nikki Minter and Andrew Hatfield will take us through an entry that was chided for years as being not so great. They look and see whether Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, actually stands the test of time. Need I remind you that this has some of the most kills of the franchise? Jason be damned. Finally, we're breaking into the third dimension and figuring out why Jason hit the gym so hard between films as I tear into Friday the 13th Part 3. D. I have some complicated feelings regarding this film, but I'll always be a Shelley stan. So let's take a look at some underrated Friday the 13th entries.
It's hard to have a series 7 movies in and expect anything truly different. In horror, anything past, let's say, part 4, by its very nature needs to start embracing some sort of schlock.
You weren't gonna ask me to marry you?
What are you, f***ing nuts?
Or it risks the killer of all storytelling, the silent death of being tedious and boring. Friday the 13th Part 7 came off the heels of The Rebirth. After A New Beginning failed to reboot a Jason-less entry, Part 6 came out f***ing swinging, injecting humor, a superhuman Voorhees, and over-the-top kills. The New Blood took Part 6's style with a more serious approach, bringing in series favorite Kane Hodder and his raging, bold interpretation of the Crystal Lake Killer. I'm Lance Velchek and have always loved Part 7. And today I'll explain the scene that sums up why. This, my friends, is Scene Breakdown. I have seen Friday the 13th Part 7 go from underdog to somewhat appreciated, back down to a lesser entry. Not my words. I mean, dude, Entertainment Weekly, Sci-Fi, and I'm old enough to remember when it was spelled correctly, IndieWire, just to name a few. But I just can't understand how this can rank so low in a series that, at its core, has always been fun, sort of meat and potatoes. Now listen, I get that if you grew up with the series as they were released, that yeah, by the time telekinesis shows up, maybe the brand has jumped the shark. Or that yeah, it's no longer scary. Both very reasonable responses, and if that's how you feel, cool. I hope life treats you well and wish you health and good fortune. But yeah, I'm here to have a good time and can appreciate the serious entries alongside the goofy ones. And putting a B-level Carrie, she's not, by the way, Lara Park Lincoln owns it here, against the most visibly upset Jason is my kind of good time. To me, he was my murdering Power Ranger when I was but a small child, and would root for him over any teen. So to me, I've always been Team Jason. Taking over directing duties for this entry is effects artist extraordinaire, the late Mr. John Carl Buechler. And just because I never felt he was quite as recognized as his peers, let me sidestep real quick. You need to check out his flawless run over at Full Moon. And of course, a spiritual successor to Friday the 13th, Hatchet. The man was as talented as he was kind. Tommy Jarvis has chained Jason to the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake. And it's here we start. And in the best and last recap of the series, by actually Crazy Ralph himself, Walt Gorney, he lets us know.
People forget he's down there.
Classic 80s, man, I just love it. Tina, Lara Park Lincoln, is taken back to Crystal Lake with the intention of hopefully getting over her trauma from killing her dad years earlier. Alongside her is her mom, Mrs. Shepard, with a haircut so 80s. David Bowie would have snorted it and Robert Palmer would have put it in his backing band.
If it's in fact true, what happened?
They are accompanied by Dr. Cruz, legendary Bernie Lomax himself, Terry Kaiser. Dr. Cruz hopes to stress Tina out, and in doing so, coerce her into using her special abilities, aka telekinesis.
The only reason that I'm here is to help you overcome the guilt that you have about your father's death.
At the neighboring lake house is a birthday party for Michael, and it's here we meet side hero Nick, played by Kevin Spiritus, and then the rest of the cannon fodder teens. But, obviously, as Raoul Duke once said,
let's get down to brass tacks here.
what is New Blood's most iconic scene? What here can define the 7th entry into the increasingly wacky Friday the 13th series? Easy. The ending house fight. The crescendo of Jason's warpath. Starting with Melissa's refusal to stay put. She declares there is better places to be with a fiery.
Fuck you. Now fuck you both.
And in one of my favorite yet simple kills, Jason decides, leaving ain't an option. Puts a hatchet in her head and tosses the body right over the f***ing TV. Now, I want to give credit here to Susan Jennifer Sullivan. Melissa is a one-note rich bitch character, but Susan really nails that snooty and prissy tone. I still hate the character nearly this many years later, so kudos Susan for going all in. Beekler's blocking here is fantastic. I love the jump to handheld when Nick and Tina try to leave. Jason trying to predict their next move as he dickishly shuts the door. A little detail that works wonders when shot in this chaotic way. It shows how quick he can be and how f***ing petty. We get set piece after set piece of Tina and Jason sparring off. Now, I know there's an issue that people have with this taking on a more serious tone after part 6, but every time Tina levels up, I believe it. The light to the face, throwing Jason into the stairs. Dude, I'm there. Now, you even get a low in the mix, disappointed sigh from Mr. Voorhees. I feel you, dude. Followed by a decently tense moment where they both need to climb over the giant hole in the stairs. Beekler wisely films this bottom up, giving us the sense that Jason is just out of reach, ready and waiting. And Jason Voorhees busting through things has always been my bread and butter. It's a show of force that's both iconic and cool. As Jason tries to crush Nick with his foot, Tina squeezes his mask straps, oozing yellow pus and saving Nick's life. Now, the Jason face reveal is something that I feel this series is pretty famous for. And they go from pretty traditional, great, iconic, to, Muppet? But the New Blood not only has the best mask reveal, with Tina squeezing off of him, but the best looking Jason Voorhees face. I said it, 100%, don't argue. Kane Hodder's surprised and shocked look, with his piercing one eye. But you know what? It's actually the shocked, gaping mouth that sells this look. And great job by Hodder, as it's a minute touch, but adds a ton of personality. Tina, being in her murder with lights phase, strangles our camp killer, sending him down below. Here, Tina fights with nails, leading to a pissed off Jason removing one center head. And his angry look rocks. Jump to a great engulfed fire shot. One in which IMDb noted that set a record for the longest uninterrupted on-screen controlled burn in Hollywood history. And as most things in the 80s were, the whole house was prone to explode at the first spark of life, so Tina and Nick escape with seconds to spare. And right here, we get that good old-fashioned effect of actually blowing shit up. According to the documentary Crystal Lake Memories, the explosion was way bigger than they had anticipated.
Lenses were smashed on the IMOs, filters were melted.
The amped up action mixed in with the lulls of tension and suspense is something that doesn't get brought up much. This ending fight scene really elevates and outdoes most of the Jason ending fights. I know that's not a big popular idea, but it's true. By now they needed to go bigger, and yeah, 7 movies in, I 100% agree. Friday the 13th Part 7 was our introduction to the Kane Hodder era, and gave Jason a style that had not yet been seen prior. John Carl Beekler was great as a director, and brought to life my go-to version of Jason Voorhees. Lar Park Lincoln as Tina was, and still is, one of the best protagonists of the entire series. You get the great Terry Kaiser as a maniacal evil psychiatrist. And listen, anything this man is in is instantly better because Kevin Spiritus makes for a great and sympathetic co-lead in the last act. And side note real quick, he's also excellent in Subspecies 2 and 3, which to me personally are two of the most underrated vampire flicks out there. So if you like this dude, please see him if you haven't. And that's it for Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. The ending house fight is the scene that sums it all up. And that's that. I don't subscribe to the hate. And yes, the MPAA infamously neutered this entry. Yeah, it sucks, but it doesn't affect the overall charm and inventiveness. I still have a great time. And in the end, Part 7 will always be the underdog to me. I'm Lance Velchek, wishing you health, happiness, and some needed time off.
Just forget it! But I think you're really out of line.
Sometimes with a franchise, and I'm talking about a bona fide hit-making franchise that turns out money and fans movie over movie, you gotta change it up. Sometimes this happens with the main character going to space, or hell, or fighting Freddy Krueger. When you take a look at a film to see if it stands the test of time, you can't pick the best or worst of the franchise. The really good ones rarely have anything bad to discuss, and the bad ones just don't merit a deeper dive. What you have to look at are the ones that took chances, that are divisive. The ones like Friday the 13th, Part 5.
Some damn enchiladas! Oh!
Just 1 year after Friday the 13th, Part 4, Part 5 was released. The movies were ridiculously popular and made money in bucket loads for the creators. The first 4 movies were made for a combined $6.3 million and brought back a staggering $151 million at the box office. Part 5 was a no-brainer, but unlike the first 3 movies in the series, Jason was dead at the end of Part 4. They did decide to keep the continuity, well, as much continuity as these movies can have, by continuing the story of young Tommy Jarvis, Slayer of Voorhees. What they didn't do was tell the cast that the movie was part of the franchise. It was advertised to prospective actors as repetition, which is way funnier than it has any right to be, and most of the cast was disappointed to find out it was part of the now famous slasher series. Speaking of the cast, for the most part, they really aren't that recognizable apart from a couple of them. The most famous is easily Corey Feldman, who has the least amount of screen time. He was supposed to come back for his role as Tommy Jarvis in a much bigger capacity, but his role in the Goonies wouldn't allow it.
This was my dream, my wish, and it didn't come true.
Behind him is our favorite enchilada sufferer, Miguel Nunez Jr. That same year, he would show up in Return of the Living Dead, and with his singing in Death as Demon in The Outhouse and his portrayal as Spider against zombies, he's forever in our horror hearts. Tommy actor John Shepherd would float around and eventually show up in the Friday the 13th TV series, as well as write for both TV and film. Everyone else only showed up in a handful of things, and a lot of them never really ventured into horror, either before or after. Carol Locatel was all over the map, but was good at blending in. She did multiple movies with Burt Reynolds, dabbled in blaxploitation, and would work steadily until she passed this year. Even not Jason himself, Dick Wien would only show up in less than 20 projects and is really just a footnote as the only non-Jason killer in the franchise. Behind the camera, we had writers Martin Kittrosser, David Cohen, and Danny Steinman, who would also direct. Kittrosser had first written a screenplay with Friday the 13th Part 3 and would also direct Silent Night, Deadly Night 5. But that's not all, as he would eventually be a script supervisor for Quentin Tarantino, beginning all the way back to Reservoir Dogs and continuing through Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Finally, we have writer-director Simon. Danny would also be limited with only 4 credits under his belt, with today's film being his last. Based on the behind-the-scenes drama, it was because of this movie that he was either soured on film or not hired anymore. He was supposed to direct a sequel to The Last House on the Left, but when that fell through, he was handed the 5th Friday the 13th movie. A New Beginning kicks off with a still kid version of Tommy Jarvis watching Jason rise from his grave and kill a couple of guys before waking up from a nightmare as an older teen. He's on his way to a psychiatric retreat filled with other people trying to help themselves. They live next to a neighbor family who doesn't want the hospital anywhere near them because one of the couples keeps having sex on their property. One of the patients, Vic, kills another patient named Joey, and after the body's picked up, the bodies start to fall. 2 random greasers are killed, followed by one of the paramedics and his date, a drifter farmhand, 2 of the other patients, and on and on and on. Tommy is suspected, but it later turns out to be a seemingly resurrected Jason Voorhees, and he kills his way through everyone except for Pam, young Reggie, and Tommy. They kill Jason again, but it's revealed that he's actually Roy Burns, the other paramedic and father of Joey, who was murdered by Vic in the beginning. The police figure he snapped after finding his son was murdered. Tommy is recovering in the hospital and seemingly breaks out, but appears behind Pam in a hockey mask with a mysterious intent that wouldn't be further explored. This is 1985, and in 1985 you had 2 big S's, slashers and sequels. On the slasher front, it had been in vogue since Halloween became a smash success in 1978. We would get Italian knockoffs like Absurd, other holiday flicks like My Bloody Valentine and New Year's Evil, and any other type of reason to get teens or, people in their late 20s playing teens together to get slashed. In terms of sequels, we already had 2 additional Halloween movies, and this was of course the 5th Friday movie. Later in the year, we would get the second Nightmare on Elm Street, and there were enough of these to get its own series on our channel. To get some really good deep dives on some of your favorite slashers as well as some obscure ones, check out Tyler's Real Slasher Show. In any case, this is what the people wanted and how the studios were making money, so you couldn't shake a stick without hitting a dozen slashers in the early to mid 80s. In addition to just being a slasher flick, you also had to try something new in the genre to get the viewership and numbers. 3 years prior, Halloween would try to make a movie in their franchise without Michael Myers, and while it failed at the time, it had gained plenty of momentum in its 41 years of existence. While I don't like this movie as much as I like Halloween 3, I applaud it for trying something new with having Roy be the killer instead of Jason. We would see things like this going forward too. The franchise would go to hell, space, and New York. I'll let you decide which was worse. And you'd see things like Freddy becoming a one-liner machine and other franchises trying new things.
Bon appetit, bitch.
Finally, this is what you came to these movies for. This has it all. A big body count, plenty of nudity, and the rules of if you have sex and do drugs, you will pay the ultimate price. While it would get stale, hell, maybe it was already stale at this point, this is why you came to these movies, and honestly why some people still marathon these flicks. I'd say the biggest thing here that holds up is the sense of continuity. You don't see a lot of this in the mainline slasher movies. We would get Heather Langenkamp in 3 different Nightmare movies, and Christy shows up in one of the straight-to-video Hellraiser movies after her first 2, but mostly they just move on to new characters. Even Halloween has its own damn multiverse, so it's hard to say what counts as continuity and what is just taking some ideas. This is part 2 of the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, and while he is played by 3 different actors in 3 different movies, it's still cool they made an actual arc. Tommy even still has some of his created horror masks in this one, giving us a comfort call back to part 4. Tommy kills Jason, runs from his memories of him, and eventually brings him back in part 6. This movie bridges the gap between the death and return of Jason Voorhees. To that end, Roy very much holds up. They tried something new, and he is very memorable even if he doesn't kill Vic to get revenge. This was also the last one for a while that had all those slasher staples: sex, nudity, gore, and plenty of kills. If stories are to be believed, this first cut of the movie was essentially softcore porn. Half of the IMDb trivia is all about having tons of those scenes cut out to achieve its R rating, and one sex scene in particular. While not all the kills are fully gory, you still get quite a few good ones, and it has the highest body count of the series. The following movies, especially 7 and 8, were butchered and censored so much that they are hard to fully enjoy at times. For all of its faults, which we will get to shortly, this movie is very much a popcorn slasher that is thoroughly enjoyable on its own. There's a couple things here that don't hold up quite as well today as the creators probably banked on. One is Roy. While I stand by what I said about Roy being fun and a cool departure for the series, they give him away too damn quick. As soon as he uncovers the sheets on Joey, we get a music stinger and the most sinister eyes that Roy can muster. Maybe you miss it on the first go-around, depending on how old you were when you first saw it, but man, it is ever so obvious. To piggyback off the wasted Roy reveal, as fun as the movie can be, it is all fluff. None, and I mean none of these characters get any real depth or growth at all. Even Roy never gets his revenge on the actual person that killed his boy. The rest of the characters besides Tommy are your standard fare, and you know exactly who's gonna live and who's gonna die. Finally, there's the iffy treatment and representation of people with mental health issues. Sure, this is a Friday the 13th movie we were talking about from 1985, but it was hastily thrown together. Even if the actor playing Tommy spent time in a mental facility to prepare for his role, he rubbed his castmates the wrong way as he got too deep into it. While he comes across alright on screen with his health issues stemming from the previous movie, the rest is just a bad caricature of what it's really like to live that life. This was a tougher one than I originally thought it was going to be. While it does have flaws, some more glaring than others, it's still a mindless good time for all the pulpy fun it delivers. It hits all the notes that a slasher film needs, but more importantly, plays a best of in the Friday the 13th universe. Roy would even be immortalized in the most recent video game, with players being able to play as our boy Roy. It stands the test of time and is more important to slasher films than it has any right to be as a trailblazer and an experiment in change.
For most of my life, Friday the 13th Part 3 was my favorite of all the Jason Voorhees exploits. It had a wonderful set of characters that genuinely felt like friends. And that Jason look. Boy, oh boy, do I love that Jason look. He's this hulking brute that looks like he could start for the Dallas Cowboys. Then when we finally get to see that grotesque face, what a thing of absolute beauty. Plus, I mean, this is the film where Jason gets his famous hockey mask. So join me on today's Real Slashers as I get into all of Jason's machete-wielding 3D exploits in Friday the 13th Part 3.
He had a knife, and he attacked me with it.
Like most Paramount-era Friday films, Part 3 begins with a recap. Or, well, I guess I should say that they just chopped the final couple minutes off of the film before it and slapped it onto the beginning here, because that's all it feels like. Guess they were really worried about runtime. But for those that skipped out on Part 2, I suppose this gives you a nice reminder of where we left Jason off. We'll just ignore the fact that his appearance changes drastically overnight. So finally, at the 7-minute and 50-second mark, we're treated to some new footage, and we get this great opening scene at a grocery store. I'll save it for slicing up a scene, but it's fantastic. Harry Manfredini returned to score the film, and it's got one awesome disco soundtrack. I mean, just listen to this. From there, we meet our cast of characters. Chris, Debbie, Andy, Shelley, Vera, Chili, and Chuck. There's also Rick once we get to the cabin itself. These are some of the most likable people we've ever gotten in a Friday the 13th film. They actually feel like real human beings, despite some of them just looking like walking stereotypes. And I'm not sure there's a single horror fan out there that didn't relate to Shelley.
Why aren't you down at the lake with everybody else?
Well, they said they were going skinny dipping, and I'm not skinny enough.
Hell, you're going to notice that a lot of the clips I'm using are lines from Shelley, because he's just full of awesome quotes. The group of friends is heading to Chris's cabin for a weekend getaway. While I'm sure you know how this goes, it's surprising where they take it. Chris had trauma when she was younger, and it's implied that she was harassed by some unknown assailant in the woods. I think we know who that is. Whether this was rape or not has been hotly debated, but the actress is adamant that it was not. Still, it gives our final girl a bit more meat to her story. One strange aspect of Part 3 is the inclusion of these bikers. They are essentially just here to cause trouble. They harass Shelley at the convenience store and then find out where they are and steal their gas. I like that it's a believable way to strand them. But then they show just how inept they are as they get picked off one by one. Except for Ali. Ali is the badass amongst all badasses. He seemingly gets off by Jason, only to come back later, save the day, and promptly get finished for his efforts. His fearlessness makes him absolutely iconic. As expected, Jason takes out all of the young adults until there's just Chris left. She puts up quite the fight too, as she's trying to escape from his clutches. And I love how much Jason feels like a creepy weirdo here. He even taunts her, taking his mask down to show her his grotesque face. She's able to seemingly kill Jason, but it wouldn't be Friday the 13th without some weird dream sequence ending. And here is no different. Chris thinks she's won, only to see Jason back up at the house, coming towards her. But then he disappears. Chris is clearly just seeing things. Only for little old Pamela Voorhees to pop out of the water, Friday Part 1 style. She drags her under, only to reveal that this is of course a dream. And Chris is taken into the back of a cop car as she laughs hysterically. She has lost her marbles. So much for a triumphant ending. Jason Voorhees is an absolute icon, and we've covered him several times both on this channel and in this series. So I'm going to focus entirely on the version of Jason we get in Part 3, because this guy is an animal. This hulking brute was played by Richard Brooker, who sadly passed away in 2013. There's a playfulness to Brooker's Jason that I think is lost in many of the films. He's almost like a dog playing with his meal. And Jason sure gets up to no good here, as he tallies up 12 different kills during the runtime. While we're just short of the fabled number 13, we can maybe count Paul during the recap at the beginning if you're wanting to get that kind of idiosyncrasy. And there's some pretty good kills too, with Andy's upside down chop to the groin being a personal favorite. I mean, yikes. Then there's Rick, who gets squeezed so hard his eyeball pops out. The effects leave a bit to be desired, but they're still so much fun. I'd still say that the most brutal kill of them all is poor Debbie. Reminiscent of Kevin Bacon's death in the first film, Jason shoves a machete up through Debbie's chest. But what makes the kill so brutal is the fact that earlier in the movie, they reveal that Debbie is pregnant. Wait, there's our 13th. A little bit morbid, but what the hell.
Hey, look, I'm eating. Huh? This is good. They fly eggs.
There are so many memorable scenes in this film, yet I'm always drawn to the opening. The Steadicam shot as it lowers to the local grocer is always a welcome sight whenever I throw this movie on. But it's the mystery that makes the scene so great. There's a hint of Jason here or there, but they're mostly hiding him in the shadows. While they tend to get away with showing him a ton in the third act, they're smart about keeping him to the shadows here at least. Hell, we even get a full-blown shot of him, but it's so far away that it's hard to even make out what's being seen.
Didn't I feed you enough for supper? The doctor said you have to lose weight now, didn't he?
But what makes the scene so memorable is the inclusion of Harold and Edna Hockett. Edna is such a raging bitch, and Harold is such a doof that it makes for a fun dynamic. I remember vividly waiting for Edna to get what was coming to her, only for poor Harold to get taken out first. Talk about conflicting emotions. Edna goes to investigate. The kills may feel a little random here, but hey, otherwise we wouldn't be seeing another death for almost an hour, so I'll take it.
God damn it, Shirley, why do you always have to be such an asshole?
I beg your pardon, I'm not an asshole. I'm an actor.
Same thing.
Friday the 13th Part 3, released in the United States on August 13th, 1982. Wow, could you really ask for a better Friday the 13th release window than that? Fans clearly agreed because it brought in over $9 million on its opening weekend. It would end its worldwide tally at $36 million. Whether or not this increase in box office was due to the 3D gimmick, or just more people wanting some slasher chaos, Friday Part 3 was a hit. Unsurprisingly, the film holds a 7% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Wait, I'm sorry, what? I know, this is just a score aggregator, but it really makes you realize how far horror films have come along since then. Because even with its faults, there's no way in hell that this is a 7% movie. I mean, 8 at least. Oddly, there are actually 2 different novelizations of the film out there. One was published in 1982 and written by Michael Avalon. This was released at the same time as the film. Then 6 years later, we received another adaptation written by Simon Hawke. Hawk had written the novelizations for 1, 2, and 6, so I guess they were trying to get a little bit of continuity there. Both are fun collector's items. And while it may not be a collector's item quite yet, the film was included in the incredible Shout Factory Blu-ray set. This includes a 3D version of the movie. Sadly though, this isn't the old school blue and red 3D. We also received an incredible limited edition steelbook for the movie's 40th anniversary. God damn, 40 years, where did the time go? There's just so much to love when it comes to this movie. The cheesy 3D gimmick and all of the lunging at the camera stuff is such a wonderful time capsule. And it's hard not to love the movie where Mr. Voorhees finally starts to look like the Jason that we all know and love. Add some wonderful characters and a cozy vibe, and you've got one of the better Friday the 13th sequels. What do you think of Part 3? Where would you rank it amongst the Friday the 13th films? I would personally put this right near the top, but that's just me. What other movies would you like to see us cover on the show? Let us know in the comments and we'll see you in the next one.
How come you never scream when we have sex?
Give me something to scream about.
What's the matter?
Nothing. I was just practicing.
Thank you so much for watching. I should say I'm quite partial to Part 5 myself, but what unexpected entry from the franchise is your favorite? Come on, we can't all choose Part 4 and Jason Lives. Let us know in the comments and we'll see you in the next one.
Gotcha, bitch!
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.